Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. My name is Dean Jones. I'm your host. This is season 7, episode 19, and today we have a sort of double header. I have two guests on the podcast today that are known for their work on social media. The first is Barry Enderwick. You might know of him as from his Sandwiches of History TikTok and Instagram account, where he makes a new sandwich every day that is different from the others, and he has a wide variety of stuff he does on there, and it's very entertaining. Alexander Crenshaw is my other guest, and he has the Library Guy blog where he talks about library programming. So Barry started off, doing different things in life, and then he worked in graphic design, and he joined the startup Netflix. Then he got work doing marketing and PR and other things in Silicon Valley. He then decided to work on some reviews on TikTok of chips and different types of chips, and that went off really well. And I think he reviewed some craft beers and some ice cream as well. And then he started doing sandwiches, and he did a different sandwich every day on TikTok and Instagram, and it just took off. And it's a very entertaining. I actually watch every episode, and I'm always very happy to watch it. It's kind of very soothing and comforting in an interesting way. And Barry's got a very nice presence, and he's just really kind of a great person to watch on social media. And I enjoy the hell out of it. And also, I love to see what he's going to come up with and what he does, and it's very entertaining. I also have links in the bio for all his different various online shows for ice cream, chips, craft beer, and sandwiches. And then my second guest is Alex Cranshaw. He's an Emerging Technologies Librarian in Sayville Library in Sayville, New York. His role encompasses technology-related programming, digital equity outreach, and managing library makerspaces. He also co-chairs the New Adult Committee's podcast, which focuses on library programming and services for patrons in their 20s and 30s. He writes about his library work, games, movies, and other interests on his blog, The Library Guy, and I have a link to that in the bio as well. I'm going to go right to these interviews and give you a chance to listen to my guests. I had a really great time doing that. I'm going with a kind of shorter format in some cases with some of my guests. And when I am able to do that, I'm going to kind of double them up. So everybody's different. Some guests are like an hour, some guests are a half hour, some guests are less. So I try and make the most of these and combine them where I can. Without further ado, here is my interview with Sandwiches of History's presenter, Barry Enderwick, and the Library Guy blog, Alexander Crenshaw. Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. Today, I'm very honored to be having on the program Barry Enderwick from the Sandwiches of History TikTok show, where he tries sandwiches from cookbooks throughout history. Barry, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, Barry, for our listeners who are not familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your TikTok and Instagram work?
Sure. Yeah. Well, for Sandwiches of History, what I do is I make recipes from old recipe books, anywhere from the 200 BC to 1700s to 1800s, 1900s. And I make them exactly as written, and sometimes they're not written very well, and see how they are. And if they're good but not great, I add modern ingredients. I plus them up, if you will, for the modern palate.
Now, do you classify these the historical recipes as BM or ABM, like before or after the invention of mayo?
No, actually, it's what's been great about this is I've learned a lot about condiments and how they evolved and how they came about. And for example, ketchup started off as fish sauce over in China, and it went to the British sailors brought it back. Britain did what they do, and they modified it, and they started making it out of walnuts or mushrooms, and then it came over to America, and then it started to be made out of tomatoes. So it's been interesting to find out like when certain things happened and how they developed.
Now, you started not with sandwiches, but with a potato chip review on TikTok. Mm-hmm. And you had quite a following with that one, a very large audience. I personally love the eclectic flavors of potato chips. When I visited England, I know that I liked prawn cocktail and chicken dinner. Do you have any favorite flavors of chips that you've tried?
There's a bunch. First of all, there's tons of great chips from all over the world, and I still do in the chips with berry. It's not as popular as sandwiches of history, which is odd, but I've been doing it a lot longer, 4+ years. Something that I just tasted from Great Lakes Potato Chip Company was a buffalo wing flavored potato chip, and they actually use dehydrated Frank's Red Hot.
Nice.
And it is perfect. It is probably the most perfect execution of a buffalo sauce on something other than a chicken wing that I've ever had.
That
So I
sounds
love
delicious.
that. The Mala Hot Pot, Pringles, of all things, from Thailand was amazing. There's a company out of Austin, Texas called Fire and Fury, I believe. And they have amazing potato chips. Their flavors are really well balanced, good amount of heat, great amount of flavor. It's just amazing. I think, okay, well, I've probably tasted most of the chips in the world, and then someone says, "Hey, have you tried this?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I've never been to Estonia," and so they'll send them to me.
You have had quite a bit of success. The numbers that you have, I think recently, are 257,000 was a recent count. Maybe not so recent, but maybe higher than that now. Have you
Um,
ever anticipated that you'd have this kind of success?
Not even close. No, not in a million years did I think that this would be as take off as it has. Like right now, I'm at 285,000 on TikTok, and the amazing thing is it took off on TikTok last year, and it's kind of slowed a little bit there. But then I originally started this on Instagram, and I did it as the videos were stories, and then the posts were just pictures of the sandwich, and it didn't do very well. And so I sort of let it languish for about 9 months. And then TikTok came along. And I thought, well, what if I took the stories from Instagram that I did and post them as videos on TikTok, and it just blew up. So then that got me thinking, what if I reapproach Instagram and post the videos as posts as opposed to the pictures? And it has blown up. And I'm currently at 75,000 followers. And towards the beginning of this year, I was around 4,000.
Wow, that's
It's
pretty impressive.
I'm stunned by it. I'm thrilled by it, but I'm stunned by it.
I really like, I mean, I love watching it because number one, I just find it to be really relaxing and fun. And we have so much, you have to kind of cover one eye to read the news anymore, or anything social, because it's all so horrible.
Yeah.
So having you come on and talk about sandwiches, I think is something we can all relate to. Like the other day, you did one that was a sliced hard-boiled egg and strawberry jam.
Mm.
And it was kind of fun to watch that. And it made me kind of think, huh, I kind of wouldn't mind trying that myself. That's pretty interesting. Do you
That's
think
awesome.
it's the relatable subject matter that we can all kind of identify with?
Yeah, well, first of all, sandwiches are universal. Pretty much any cuisine you go to, you're going to find someone putting something between two pieces of bread, some sort of bread. And versatile. Like you can make a sandwich that's Thai. You can make a sandwich that's Polish. You can make a sandwich that's American, right? So it cuts across cuisines. It's portable. It's easily accessible and highly relatable. I also think part of the reason why this has taken off is because both TikTok and even more so now Instagram is kind of a sea of chaos itself. I agree
Yes.
with you about the news, but also within the app, there's a lot of people dancing, flashing, saying, "Look at me do this." They're trying to get attention for stunts, or they're trying to do stuff, and I'm just a guy making sandwiches.
Yeah,
And
no, that's true. You're
I
not
think
selling
that,
anything.
well, that's not true. I do have merch, but
Oh yeah, 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 true.
and I am working on a cookbook, um, but yeah, I'm just like, hey, let's try the sandwich. And if it's not totally great, let's see if we can make it great. Check it out.
How long has it been since you started it? How many episodes have you had?
Oh, geez, I don't even know how many episodes I've done. I started it, well, again, I started on Instagram and it kind of languished for 9 months, but the renaissance, if you will, of it on TikTok started in March of last year. 2021, March of 2021. And then I ported it back to Instagram.
You have a lot of books that you utilize, you
Yeah.
mine for content. So you could conceivably do this for several years.
Oh, absolutely. And I keep finding more books. Uh, at this point, I think I've got like 20 to 30 books, some dedicated entirely to sandwiches, some just have sections on sandwiches, or a section on sandwiches.
I think
It's like,
most of, go ahead, sorry.
I want to say that again. That was terrible.
Go ahead. I'll edit that.
um, yeah, I've got probably 20 to 30 books, and some are dedicated entirely to sandwiches, and some just have a section on sandwiches. But I can't imagine ever running out of old sandwich recipes to make.
Now, I know I like to try the odd sandwich every once in a while and see what I can come up with. And sometimes I like to try things like putting potato chips in my sandwich or
Yes.
trying something unusual like Marmite. Have you ever, like in the past, before you had the show, like try to kind of try different innovative sandwiches and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I love to cook all kinds of food in general, and I'm very curious about different flavor combinations and different techniques and things like that. So yeah, I've been playing with my food for a while now. But yeah, potato chips and sandwiches are a brilliant way to plus something up. You get excellent crunch, you get texture. Probably depending on what chip you use, you bring a little bit of flavor to the party. I love it.
Now, you're no slouch cooking outside of sandwiches. I could tell because you'll just suddenly throw out something like recently I saw you make an unusual loaf of Maltion. Is I saying it right? Malton?
Maltese,
Maltese bread.
yeah.
And you had capers and a lot of things many of us wouldn't normally have, like arugula and stuff.
Yep.
I can tell you really seem to like cooking. Have you always been interested in cooking?
Thanks. Yes. Well, actually, no. Let me rephrase that. So, growing up, my neither of my parents were experts in the ways of the kitchen, and my mom would have copped to that. But I met my significant other when I was in my early 20s, and her family loved food and loved cooking, and I started to see what cooking could bring to the table, what kind of different things you could do with food that just didn't occur to me because I hadn't had the experience. And since then, I've been pretty rabid about watching cooking shows, doing cooking out of cookbooks, trying to create recipes myself. And so it's spurred me to do that. I have two other channels, Ice Cream O'Clock on TikTok, or Barry's Ice Cream O'Clock, where I try to do sweet and savory combinations like Thanksgiving stuffing ice cream, which was brilliant. I do
Nice.
say so myself, I will be making that for Thanksgiving. And then the Barry Cooks TikTok and Barry is Cooking Again, which I have to name it differently on Instagram, but that's just me trying out recipes that I've never done before. And that Maltese bread, by the way, I'm a terrible baker. I don't know how that came out so good. I really don't. Like that speaks to the power of the recipe that I followed.
Yeah, it looked really good. You had really good air holes in it, and it looked really like a good solid loaf. I was impressed.
I was shocked.
No, bread can be iffy. I know. I've made a lot of like door stops in my time. So
Yeah, that's all I make typically. So that one came out and it was just like, what? And it was a no need. So there were several steps that you had to take, but you really didn't have to sit there and work the dough or anything like that. And it came out brilliant.
one of the things I've seen that you've dealt with is the instructions in some of the cookbooks that are much older. Sometimes kind of don't turn out good results. I know that like I like anchovies, and I think most people that if they try them, they will recognize they like them. They're not horrible,
Right.
like I think the cultural myth gives them. But I know that sometimes the amounts of anchovies used are kind of like excessive, or the amount of time to hard boil an egg like was 30 minutes in one case, which was excessive.
Yes. And it's funny. I found a number of recipes that call for it to be just below a boil for anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. And I tried it and it was awful, as you would expect. Very sulfurous, not very good. And I agree with you on the anchovies. It's like it's an umami little like secret flavor bomb that you can put in different stuff and it really boosts the flavor. But when the recipe is sardines and anchovies and it calls for equal amounts, not so great.
Was there any sandwich or a couple sandwiches that were standouts to you that were just really heinous?
Well, I mean, recently there was one from 1924 called the banana, lettuce, and anchovy sandwich. And
Oh,
like, first of all, that combo should not be in the same sentence, but they called for anchovy paste and a lot of it, and it was just awful. And the funny thing is, 1924, before the 1950s, the world ate what was called a Gros Michel banana. That was the variety.
right.
Then a blight came along and pretty much wiped it out from a cash crop perspective. Everyone thinks that it's extinct, but it's not extinct. It just can't. It's not viable as a cash crop. So a few months ago, I bought some Gros Michel bananas from this company called Miami Fruit because you can still get them. And I made a series of sandwiches with it, and they're sweeter and more banana-y. And people were commenting on the banana, lettuce, and anchovy sandwich, saying, "Well, there were different bananas then, so it probably was different." I'm like, that would have been worse. An even sweeter banana with that anchovy paste would have just been
Yikes.
ridiculous.
Now, you've tried a few, and I think I'll point back to the egg and jam one. That didn't
Mhm.
sound too bad for me because I like jelly omelets. So which I've seen in cookbooks and stuff. So I don't think that's too unusual. Were
Mm.
there any that kind of you thought this is going to be horrible, but then you're like, oh, this isn't so bad?
None that sounded horrible. There have been ones that I'm like, I have been surprised by. Like, I'll be honest that I've not had the jelly omelet, which I now want to try because, I'm like, okay, so there's strawberry jam and there's hard cooked eggs. That didn't I couldn't make the connection in my head. But I tried it and it was great, and I highly recommend it with a little nutmeg because that was really nice. But yeah, there are sandwiches. Usually when the sandwich, I read a sandwich recipe and it's like the banana, lettuce, and anchovy, I can tell right away there's probably not going to be any way to redeem this. I still keep an open mind. I still try to go into it and like, let's taste it and see if there's a way to do it. But no. Typically, if I read a recipe and it sounds horrible, it's going to be horrible.
Yeah, I always use the Marmite as a barometer because like I like Marmite, but I think people try Marmite and they're putting like a quarter cup of it on the sandwich, which is impossible. But if you do this the barest amount,
Right.
it is a nice enhancer to something. It could be a great sandwich with other things.
Yeah, I haven't done Marmite yet. I've done Vegemite,
Yeah.
and I followed instructions with lots of butter, very thin layer of Vegemite, and cheddar cheese, and it was quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I like it with other things. I'll eat it on toast, but again,
Yeah.
no, you just do the slightest amount too much, and it's pretty nasty.
Yes. Yeah. You could. It's easy to go over the line on that one.
Do you have a favorite sandwich at this point? Is that impossible to ask you at this point, or?
My answer to this question is wholly unsatisfying, and that is it depends on my mood and the day and where I'm at, right? So there's some days when it's like my answer is going to be a grilled cheese sandwich with pickles in the middle. Some
Nice.
days it's going to be I want roast beef with blue cheese and arugula, or some days it's going to be I want a grilled shrimp BLT with avocado, right? So it really depends on where I'm at and how hungry I am, I guess.
Now you tried the famous Elvis Presley sandwich. Do
Mhm.
you want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure, yeah. So a lot of people think that there's bacon in it, and there is not. If you go to YouTube, there's an interview with his cook from the 70s that BBC did.
Yeah.
And it is banana, peanut butter, and then fried in butter. It is delicious, but it ain't healthy.
No.
And apparently he has several favorite sandwiches. I did one called the Fool's Gold,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that one was blueberry jam, peanut butter, and that did have bacon in it. And that was really good. It was really good with a little chili powder too.
Nice.
And there's one other one I have to get to where he has potatoes fried in butter and bacon and something else. He liked the fried foods a lot, which who can blame him?
Now you have a fan base, I'm sure, based on the shows and the other shows. Do you get a lot of people sending you ideas or cookbooks?
Yeah, people are definitely sharing their old cookbooks that they have at home that maybe their grandmother had and that kind of stuff, which is fantastic. And yeah, people do submit sandwich ideas. A lot of times they submit sandwich ideas that they came up with, which really doesn't quite fit with the sandwiches of history. If they have a sandwich that like my dad used to make this, that does, and I do occasional episodes where it's sandwiches of our history, and that the strawberry jam and egg episode was a prime example of that. That was someone who wrote in and said, my dad used to make this all the time. He loved it. Lots of salt and pepper. Try it. I'm like, okay, I'll try it. And then I was like, well, wait a sec. This has some potentials for plussing up. So I decided to do the 4-way plus up, which is rare.
Now, I wanted to ask you if there was a deli that was to have a berry sandwich for sale,
Mhm.
what would it be?
Oh, that's almost like that's kind of tough because yeah, that's almost like asking what's my favorite sandwich.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I don't. That's tough. Actually, a restaurant in Oregon asked if I would be okay putting a sandwich on the menu with my name on it. I said, yeah, I just got to think about what it is, what's it going to be. And I still haven't figured it out. Because again, I don't want it to just be one sandwich.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to be typed.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I remember the White Trash cookbook had a Kiss Me Not sandwich in it that was a slice of a Bermuda onion on mayo with mayo on white bread. Have you ever
Uh,
tried that one?
I have not tried that specific one, but a lot of recipe books have onion sandwich recipes in them. Some call for you to soak the onion in water for like 30 minutes to take the sting out of it. One from the up-to-date sandwich book of 1909 was interesting. It was onion, whipped cream on Boston brown bread. And
I
it
can
was
kind of
not,
see that.
it was not bad. It was surprisingly not bad. That would be one of the ones that I thought was going to be just awful, and it was not.
I love Boston brown bread, so that'd always be a hit for me.
Yeah, no, me too. Bread in a can.
It's good though. It's surprisingly good.
Absolutely. I
Can
grew up
you
with it.
can you tell our listeners about the gluten-free dairy sandwich? I say gluten-free tongue in cheek, but the dairy
Yeah.
sandwich was what gave me a laugh when I saw that one.
Yeah, that was from the up-to-date sandwich book of 1909. You take one slice of Swiss cheese, you butter it, and then you put another slice of Swiss cheese on top of it. And that's it. You're done. That's the sandwich. There's no bread. There's no instruction for bread. There's nothing in there. And, you know, part of me now looking back on it wonders, like, is it just because they were terrible at recipe writing? Because they really were. It was more art than science back then. Because there's one sandwich in that same book where they say to assemble the sandwich, dip it in a mixture of beaten egg and milk, and that's it. And it's like, there's no way someone's serving you a sandwich dipped in egg and milk and not cooked. That, come on. So, but I mean, usually they at least say bread, and the dairy sandwich just had no bread, and it was called the dairy sandwich. So, yeah, who am
Now,
I?
you're selling merch now. Can you tell us about the merchandise? I can put a link to it on the bio too.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, no, it's just basically t-shirts with the logo and then maybe some of the phrases that I say, like I'm going to plus this up. And then like an apron, which I actually need to get one of those so I can protect my shirts. And just general merchandise.
Now, you mentioned, are you working on a sandwich cookbook right now?
I am actually. I'm talking right now. I'm talking to two publishers who are interested, but I'm working on it in the background without any deal in place yet. I just got representation, so I have an agent now. Also working with a TV production company to potentially develop this into a TV show.
That would be great. I would love that. I think the TV show, I'm happy to hear that because it seems like I just imagine like when I first saw your work online, I thought this would just be a great TV show. This seems like a no-brainer. Like I would be surprised if they didn't contact you. So this is going to be good.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, one of the biggest struggles is, you know, the format that I'm doing this in is it's 1 to 3 minutes long, maybe 4 minutes. Yesterday's was 4 minutes because it was a pretty involved recipe. So how do you pull that into more of a 20-minute, 22-minute format and still retain what has caused people to enjoy the videos on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and Facebook?
Do you have any tips for people that are getting into social media and want to kind of be a success also?
I don't, it's tough for me to extrapolate from what I've done to necessarily have broad. I don't know. There's no way I can guarantee that this would work. What I did was I decided I wanted to try this, and I want to make sure that it was in something that I would like to watch, and I wanted to make sure it was very specific, right? So this is why I've got Sandwiches of History as a specific channel, In the Chips with Barry as my review channel, Ice Cream O'Clock as the ice cream channel. Like, I didn't want to do a bunch of different stuff on one channel. I wanted to explore, go deep within one specific niche, if you will. I want to go deep into one niche at a time. And the other thing that was interesting and odd to me is you see a lot of recommendations like, oh, you got to post 3 to 4 times a day. You got to do this. And it's like, I post one video. I post it at noon Pacific every day, every single day, without fail, like clockwork, 365 days a year. Now, I think that consistency actually helps considerably.
Yeah.
And it probably actually is more helpful to do that than it is to post multiple times a day with a scattering of ideas.
Yeah. I like that. Now you're like me, a Bay Area Denzian. Do you have any favorite restaurants you want to give a shout out to in the Bay Area?
We don't go out to eat a whole lot, especially because of the pandemic. But
Right.
One of the places we absolutely love to visit is Dad's Luncheonette in Half Moon Bay.
Ooh.
Have you been there?
No, but I love Half Moon Bay and I want to go there. That sounds like a good place.
It is. It's run by this guy named Scott, who used to be a chef at Saison in San Francisco, Michelin starred, and just decided that life was going to be too hectic for himself, his wife, and his kid. So he has this caboose in Half Moon Bay that is his restaurant, his kitchen. And it's got a pretty straightforward menu, but it's just delicious. Hamburgers. He's got this mushroom sandwich. That's my go-to. And I'm not a vegetarian, but that is my go-to. It's so good. And he's got potato chips and he's a good guy too. He's a very good guy. So I highly recommend that for sure.
That sounds great. I'm going to be going there soon, so I'll try that out.
The other one I would recommend is in San Jose, and it doesn't look like much when you pull up, and the neighborhood's not going to wow you. But Falafel's Drive-In, it's been around since I think the 60s, maybe late 50s, and their falafel is fantastic. Their pita chips coated in za'atar, so it's just delicious pita chips. They have onion rings and they're delicious. So, but the falafel is there, and then they also have banana shakes. They use real bananas and ice cream to make. So
nice.
It's so good.
That sounds really wonderful. I'll try both of those places. We're going to go to Half Moon Bay soon, and I'll try that. And then we go to San Jose all the time. So that sounds wonderful.
Well, let me know what you think of those.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Barry, I want to thank you for being on the program. I've really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you. I hope we get a chance to talk to you here again.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org. Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Alexander Cranshaw, an Emerging Technologies Librarian and former Makerspace Librarian. Alexander is also a blogger who writes the popular Library Guide blog. Alex, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Alex, I want to ask you about your work as a librarian. Did you always want to be a librarian? When did this start for you?
No, actually, the career of librarianship didn't really enter my mind until probably my mid-20s. Like most people who love libraries, it started when I was a kid. My parents would take me here, and it was just a big playground full of books and movies and all sorts of fun things. I would go to the library as I got older, just as a quiet place to read, and just a quiet kind of like refuge. But I've worked every job under the sun. I mentioned to you earlier that I worked in the restaurant industry. I was a cook for many, many years, and I kind of just got chewed up from that industry and spit out. And, after I ended my career as a sous chef, I said, I need to rethink what I want to do. And my mom's best friend actually was a librarian at University of Massachusetts. And she said, you should try librarianship. And I said, that's something I haven't thought of before. So, fast forward a few years, graduated, and here I am.
You and I have that in common, I think. I worked in restaurants for a while too. And I actually got asked to be a sous chef and was given some training, but I eventually discovered I was too ADHD. I didn't want to get shivved by one of the chefs, so I decided not to stay in the industry.
That's a real hazard in the restaurant industry.
Yeah. I don't want to mess up some order and have them kill me, so forget it. You write a lot about programming and a lot of stuff that deals with like makerspaces and the different types of programming. Now, people that don't know the library industry don't understand, I think, often that there's so many facets of being a librarian and so many different types of librarian you could be, or libraries you could work in. What about the programming aspect of it appealed to you?
That's a good question. A lot of the programming that I do is kind of technology based. So it really just started from my own personal interest. The first library job I had when I was still in graduate school, they required every librarian to do a class. So I was, I've been a chef before that. I had no person-to-person skills at all. Like my only person-to-person skills was screaming orders at people. So, I kind of racked my brain, and I was like, well, I used to play D&D. I'm good with tech, so I'll try to do something with that. And then it kind of snowballed. I got good feedback. I felt more confident doing programming, and it just kind of expand from that. And now that's honestly, it's almost a bulk of what I do now is programming. So yeah, it wasn't ever my plan. It kind of fell into it and just snowballed from there.
Programming in libraries has changed so much over the years. Recently, we had the curveball of the quarantine for coronavirus. How did that change programming in libraries from what you've seen?
That was a huge challenge. I'm from New York, and it was a big deal here, as I'm sure it was a big deal for most places in the world. But we went totally virtual for several months, and I was actually in a better place for adapting to do virtual programming because I was doing mostly tech things anyways, and the tech programs I was teaching, a lot of the programs I would teach were free or cloud-based, so you didn't need a big expensive computer to run any of those programs. So that it wasn't an easy transition, but it was
Right.
I had a path to going virtual. And then the gaming programs I would do for the the teen department, Smash Bros, Mario Kart, those sorts of things already have an online component to them. So that was sort of an easy transition. Yeah, so I would guess I was in a better position than most people. But it's definitely taken a toll. Our numbers are not back to where they were pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
We're getting close. They're trending upwards. Some patron groups are coming back quicker than others. But yeah, I mean, we still have the online component in our programming still. I don't think that will ever really go away. We're doing a lot more hybrid programs, online and in person, than we've ever done before. So it's been a challenge, but I think we're meeting it pretty well. And yeah, we're growing. We're steadily getting back to that normal.
I know that programming is really influenced by trends and technology. I know that Zoom had a huge impact on programming. What are some of the trends and things that you're seeing in programming right now?
Well, being the Emerging Technologies Librarian, what I have personally experienced is the makerspace sort of movement really gain a lot of momentum in the last 5 years or so. It's always it's been around longer than that, but I've seen some libraries really make moves to have a dedicated makerspace or start offering those sorts of programs more broadly. So that is something I've definitely noticed. I've worked at four libraries, and at 3 of those 4 libraries, I've been a part of developing a makerspace at the library. So that's part of that's just being in the right place at the right time. But that's definitely something that's on the radar of a lot of libraries, expanding those programs, offering more services to their patrons, getting more technology, training people on how to use that technology. That's something I've seen grow quite a bit.
Now, you have a blog, The Library Guy, and I really was attracted to it because I was brainstorming and trying to find some ideas for programming, and it really caught my eye because it had a lot of stuff that spoke to me about things I wanted to do, and it had a lot of really great ideas. What kind of prompted you to start writing the blog, The Library Guy?
I was in a position just like you. I mean, I was told I needed to do programs for a library. I needed scratching my head. Where should I go? I went online and I wasn't seeing anything. Anybody, I mean, there are websites out there that offer, good programming ideas, but a lot of it's geared for kids.
Yes.
Or is just totally irrelevant to what I wanted to be teaching. So part of it was, I mean, I felt like I had some ideas that I wanted to share with people, but there was no wiki or any kind of website out there for just anyone to submit ideas. So I'm like, well, I may as well just start one myself. I know how to make a WordPress blog. So that's kind of where it started. And then again, like I worked in the restaurant industry. So all of my previous work experience was all just hustling. You never had a spare moment. So when I became a librarian and all of a sudden this concept of like off desk time, which was like totally foreign to me, I'm like, well, I can't just sit idly, so I may as well start doing something. So I used some of my off desk time to start writing it. And that's kind of where it got started. And then the pandemic hit, and then I had a lot more free time. So I started just writing out some program descriptions, some how-tos on how to do some of the things I was doing, and just random thoughts that would come into my head. And I I needed a place to get them out. So I already had this blog, so I thought I'd post them there.
When I read your articles, I reached out to you to talk to you about your blog. Do you get emails from librarians all over talking to you about your ideas?
Yeah, I do actually. And it's surprising. I love to hear from people. The Dungeons and Dragons post is by far the most popular. Getting librarians from Kentucky and Louisiana and California, and I got one from the UK asking, I want to do a D&D program, but I don't know where to start. This was really helpful. So that was really great to hear. So yeah, there's definitely been some interest. I know every library wants to have a D&D club, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. A lot of people don't realize it. So I try to give people as many resources and advice as possible to get started, because it's more than just, giving a couple of nerds a room with a book. It's a lot of prep.
I think what inspired me to become a librarian is years ago when I was living in rural Washington, a librarian took a chance and let me and some friends have a D&D club in the basement of the library. And it was very controversial at the time. I don't know if you remember, but D&D was considered a gateway to Satanism back in the 80s and et cetera. And it was considered, I think they've talked about that on Stranger Things recently. And I had read your article, and that same day, weirdly enough, I was kind of passing by one of our study rooms, and these kids were sitting around a table playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I popped my head in, and they immediately thought they're in trouble. And I'm like, hey, no, this is cool. Do you guys want to start a D&D club? And they're like, yeah. They were so excited. And I said, well, I used to play D&D when I was your age. And this one girl's like, oh my God, they had D&D when you were young. I'm like, yeah, they had D&D when I was young.
That's awesome.
So, you're the chair of the Suffolk County, New York Library Association's New Adult Committee, and you also have a podcast called the New Adult Committee, which I've listened to and love. Talk to us about this podcast a little bit.
Again, this is another child of the pandemic. I am co-chair with Andrew, who's a teen librarian at another library in Suffolk County, and most of the committee meetings we would do in person. We'd have a guest come in, and that was fine. But we realized, when the pandemic hit, we're not going to do anything in person. How can we keep this going? We don't want to do virtual meetings that are kind of ephemeral, and if you didn't catch it, they're gone. So we thought, well, let's just record it and make it a podcast. So we've been doing it now for over a year, and it's been a really great format. We'll have a guest come in and we'll talk about some subject related to libraries, specifically new adults. So we kind of target people in their, fresh out of high school through mid 30s, 40s, somewhere around there. So yeah, we'll pick a topic. We'll talk about it for half an hour to an hour, depending on how much the guest wants to talk. And it's been a really good experience.
Now, I know because I listened to it, but for our listeners, what are some of the topics you covered on the podcast?
We've done everything. Our most recent episode, I believe, was student loan forgiveness options.
Great one, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, we've done, I think the next one we're going to do is first time home buyers. We've done resources for LGBTQ patrons, community members. I'm scratching my head now. I need to look it back. But yeah, we've done pretty diverse topics. One of the next ones we're going to be doing is fan fests or Comic-Cons, something like that. So yeah, virtual programming for people in their 20s and 30s, things like that.
I'm going to put a link in the bio to the podcast just for our listeners so they can use that as a jump off point.
Thanks.
You developed a game called Clandestine, which is a free role-playing game. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was another just germ in my head that I just needed to get out. I've been playing D&D since I was 7 years old. So role-playing games, board games in general, they've just always been a part of my life. So I had an idea. I love like detective kind of pulpy kind of stuff. So I was like, well, I want to try to make a role-playing game out of that. So that's where that came. That's where that came from.
How about your video game called Pulpergeist? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So again, it's like a detective pulpy kind of story. Like you'd get like the pulp novels in like the 20s and 30s where it's like a detective and there's some kind of paranormal thing going on usually. So it's the first video game I've ever made. It's for a console called the Playdate, which is like a little tiny Game Boy thing with a crank. Look up pictures of it. It's pretty cool. I love like the retro video games and stuff. So yeah, that was a learning experience for sure, because I'd never made a game before and my programming skills are very weak. So it was an experience, but yeah, it's done. I'm still working on it too. I'm adding stuff all the time, and I'm actually working on an epilogue chapter for it right now. So hopefully I'll have that done in a couple of months.
Now, I was going to ask you these other questions because I always love talking to other librarians. But for the people that are listening that are not librarians or don't work in the industry, what do you think is some of the things that you'd like people to know about being a librarian, or that you think that people should know about being a librarian?
Well, I guess the first thing is, the old like stereotype of, the old maid shushing people in a big dusty room full of books doesn't exist. That hasn't existed for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
A librarian there's so many different kinds of librarians, as you mentioned earlier. There are still librarians that, work the desk and are there to help people to do everything from research some very esoteric topic to find a job, fill out a resume, find housing, all kind of, we're kind of like the safety net in certain ways, like where do you go to get an answer to a question where there's nowhere else to go? We'll help you find a social service. We'll direct you to, job finding like resources. So we're kind of like the safety net in that way. Then there's the programming aspect, the community building aspect. There's community outreach now is a big thing. We're going out to the community to meet you where you are, to, offer you services. That's something that I'm trying to get more involved with. There's just so many aspects. We're not just a warehouse of books. We're part of the community, and we're trying to get our fingers in everything now. I guess that's the biggest thing.
What kind of character did you play when you played Dungeons and Dragons? Did you play any typical characters that you really like to play more than others?
When I do get to play, I like to play a bard, but usually
Nice.
I'm the dungeon master. So being a dungeon master is fun, but sometimes you don't want to spend a week planning an hour of a game. So, but when I do play, I like to play the bard. I like to play somebody who's just goofy, somebody who can just be the butt of a joke. I don't like playing like the superhero characters that just go in and kick butt. That's fun, but I think it's more fun to be the person who slips on a banana peel and falls in a cow pie and, makes everyone's night.
Now, you said you like kind of some, referring to your games you created, you like kind of like a noir thing on there, and kind of like with Clandestine. Have you ever played Call of Cthulhu?
I haven't actually played it, but I'm familiar with it. Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I was going for.
Yeah, that's a fun game. Although everybody pretty much dies in the game, characters don't tend to be long lived.
That's fine. That's fine.
Well, I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you, Alex, and I really loved having you on the program. And I want to really recommend your website and your podcast because it's really great.
Thank you very much.
That was my conversation with Sandwiches of History's Barry Enderwick and the library guy blog Alexander Cranshaw, who is a librarian and blogger. Also a podcaster as well. Links are in the bio for all these things for these guests who are very, very multifaceted individuals. Next week, I'm going to have a guest I really enjoy getting a chance to talk to, Carolyn Fetterman from the local Charlie Cart, which is a wonderful organization that teaches kids about food and food production and provides information and instruction for providing food for themselves. She also has a book, New Favorites for New Cooks, 50 Delicious Recipes for Kids to Make. That's a really great cookbook that I enjoyed reading, and I just can't talk enough about because it's so wonderfully produced. She's going to be on next week. So I hope you all have a really great week and enjoy my podcast. If you liked the podcast, there's links on the bio information where you can buy me a cup of coffee or a pint, leave information or feedback. And also, if you like to share this podcast with other people, I really appreciate it. If you can share this on social media so others get to know about the podcast. I really want to thank Asian Man Records for allowing us to use the song Talk About Love by the wonderful group Kitty Cat Fan Club on their label, among other artists. Check out asianmanrecords.com for information on the bands that they promote and produce. And also, you can buy albums on there, t-shirts, hoodies, stickers, all kinds of things. Please check out that website. I hope you all have a really wonderful week. Keep on cooking.
I've been getting better than you.